While I am about to start this video off with some bad news, there is a bunch of good news too, but let's just get the bad news out of the way first, and then wash away the bad taste with some stuff to look forward to. This includes a first look at Broken Arrow's nuclear missiles, as well as a big infantry gameplay overhaul that will shift the game's upcoming meta quite a bit, I think. So Broken Arrow finally broke their silence a few weeks back when they announced the moving of the release date from late 2024 to sometime in 2025. This is obviously in itself a little bit disappointing, but I think a focus on making the game better versus just pumping out something now and then having to spend months fixing it up is honestly a good idea. This is especially true as those first impressions really matter. The game can be great 6 months after release, but the negative word of mouth going around and all the negative Steam reviews during those initial 6 months could really hamper any future potential that a game can have. However, there's also some good news, as I said. On November 12th, the developers will launch another open beta. This will again be a multiplayer one. The last open beta was actually a lot of fun, and I look forward to playing more of the game, though it would be cool to allow players to access the much talked about level editor, even if it's just to take a look around inside. I believe the previous beta only had PvP multiplayer games and no real ability to have AI take slots to create a co-op or humans versus bots game. I do hope that either in this upcoming beta, or at the very worst, actually at the release of the game, bots will be able to be assigned slots for a PvE experience outside of the single player mode, but they haven't really said much about that if I'm not mistaken. Besides the release being delayed and the open beta date revealed, this announcement also talked about a very quote important reveal end quote, which is the occasion for a quote very special announcement everyone is waiting for end quote sometime in December. This could perhaps be a third in-game nation that's being revealed and released with the game in 2025, and that's what the delay is for. I'm not really sure what it might be, but I look forward to reading your speculation down in the comments. Now, besides this news, the developers also put out some more info in Dev Diary number 8, which contains changes for existing deck specializations inside Broken Arrow following player feedback from the last beta, as well as a little bit more info regarding the upcoming beta in November. A ton of smaller or more detailed changes, such as unit costs or individual stat changes, have been made, but that's not something covered in this blog. In a previous beta, the US and Russian factions both had 2 specializations available. Now, these specializations are sort of similar to what you'd have in World in Conflict, like armor, support, infantry, or air focused. However, where in World in Conflict you'd pick one of these, in Broken Arrow you can actually pick 2 of them and then combine them to build your deck. The issue with that being that in the last beta, both factions only had 2 specializations or specs to pick from. However, in the upcoming beta, both nations will get a 3rd spec added to the roster. This means there will finally be some variation, as some people might combine spec 1 and 2, while others will combine either spec 1 and 3 or spec 2 and 3, so you have at least 3 different major options that you can pick from now. So while the spec for each nation is a secret at the moment, they will reveal them between now and the beta launching in about a month, so expect me to cover those in a video in the near future. However, each of the 4 existing specs in the game has gotten bigger or smaller changes. I figured we could go over some of them here, beginning with the USMC or US Marine Spec. The Marine Spec get a few new vehicles, such as the amphibious ACV, which is supposed to be the replacement for the famous AAVs. This comes with either a remote-controlled 50 cal or can be upgraded through Broken Arrow's unique upgrade system to add more firepower in the form of a 30mm cannon. I won't go too deep into the upgrade system, I've done that in the past, but basically very shortly explain it works exactly like this. Say you have a Humvee, it might cost 10 points to bring it onto the battlefield armed with an M240 medium machine gun. However, you can upgrade it with either a 50 caliber machine gun or a Mark 19 grenade launcher for say 10 or 15 extra points. Perhaps you even want to add extra armor to it for a further 5 points, meaning there is a ton of customization, and this goes for a lot of different units. This also goes for squads as an infantry squad loadouts as well. Picking a more suppressed but shorter range loadout for a sniper team, for example, or selecting a certain role for jets or helicopters gives a lot of flexibility and customization power to the players. They actually mentioned the M1A1 FEP here, which can now add the trophy APS system to it, which will intercept up to 4 incoming projectiles. Obviously, this will increase the cost of the tank, but it will also help it stay in the battle longer before it has to repair or deal with reloading the APS system. Now, personally, I'd never heard of the AAV Miklik or Catfay, but these are 2 very interesting additions to the USMC deck. The Miklik AAV has 3 rockets that, when fired, extend an explosive-fitted cable, which is very useful to engage entrenched infantry, even if they are inside a building. And then the Catfay sounds like a sort of impromptu mortar, which will be firing 21 thermobaric rockets in close range, both of these adding to the USMC's ability to fight up close and personal in Broken Arrow. There's actually more stuff for the US Marines, but let's move on to the US Armored Brigade spec now with the M1150 Assault Breacher. It kind of looks like a vehicle straight out of Command & Conquer's Tiberian Sun game. This vehicle is similar to the AAV Miklik, but it obviously has a little bit more staying power as it's built on the chassis of an Abrams, which obviously is especially useful seeing as these vehicles have to move in close to engage buildings or entrenched infantry. Furthermore, an upgrade to the M270 MLRS now allows it to carry 4 PRSM ballistic missiles or 12 guided rockets with explosive or cluster warheads. The Russian VDV, or their airborne spec, is getting some big changes. One of the bigger ones is allowing infantry transports to be airdropped. This way, the infantry doesn't have to fight behind enemy lines alone and can even use these vehicles to redeploy a lot more quickly once they're on the ground. A huge quality of life upgrade is the fact that the IL-76 transport plane will no longer need to be given the pair drop order after it's called in. It'll actually automatically airdrop units at the chosen location. You can of course always cancel or change the drop location if the enemy has a little bit more anti-air or air power than you initially thought. Now, this only describes the IL-76, but I'm pretty sure we'll get the US airborne spec in the next beta, and I'm pretty sure this will also go for the American variant of that. Opening games by pair dropping a large amount of infantry and vehicles far forward is still very fun, though risky, and I can't wait to do more of it during the next beta. I've seen Broken Arrow referred to as a sort of spiritual follow-up to World in Conflict, and of course this means we have to be able to launch tactical nukes, and in a new beta you will be able to. The Russian Tu-160 can carry Kh-102 cruise missiles with a nuclear warhead. The Americans will also be getting nukes in the upcoming open beta, however the plane that's going to be launching them is yet to be revealed. As I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this will be part of the US Air Force or airborne spec that is heavily believed to be one of the specs that hasn't been showcased yet in Broken Arrow until this point. Keep in mind that these nuclear missiles, even after being fired from the aircraft, can still be intercepted. So unlike World in Conflict, where an incoming nuke was a guaranteed hit, you will have to make sure that both the skies are clear of interceptors and the ground of anti-aircraft systems. While this is mentioned under the VDV specifically, I really can only assume this goes for all specs and all factions in Broken Arrow. Infantry, though interesting at the start, especially when airdropped via helicopter or plane, always felt a little squishy and honestly inferior compared to vehicles to a large part of the community. So here are some of the changes to infantry and how they will be interacting with other units going forward. Infantry resilience has been increased by 25%. Whether this means they have just increased their hit pool by 25% or if they take 25% less damage, I'm not really sure, but either way, it's honestly not a bad buff. Light anti-tank weaponry has also gotten a damage increase anywhere from 10 to 25% depending on the launcher. AT rockets will cause critical effects on vehicles every single time. What this means exactly, I am not sure of, but I believe it might refer to knocking out systems such as tracks or the aiming system upon a hit. A big one here, buildings that collapse are no longer going to be insta-killing everyone inside. Each soldier has a percentage chance to survive the collapse instead, making infantry obviously a lot less squishy in these city fights. Furthermore, every infantry squad now has been given the sprint ability, which makes sense and is honestly a pretty great change. I do think it would be interesting to make more specialized or trained units have longer sprint durations compared to, say, reservists or more basic infantry squads. That's still not all though. Infantry weapons like rifles and machine guns will do more damage, and while shotguns got a big range cut, their damage has been increased by a lot to make up for it. While sniper rifles will now ignore building cover bombs bonuses, marksman rifles will still ignore 50% of a building's cover bonus as a middle ground option between sniper rifles and regular rifles. Furthermore, suppressed weapons will do more damage, but their penetration and range has been decreased. I do believe that suppressed options for some squads already showed a decreased range, so it may have even decreased more in the next update. Finally, a small graphical and animation overhaul is talked about here as well, with gunners and drivers added to many vehicles that might have lacked a model for it initially. Furthermore, animations for doors opening and missiles being reloaded have been added as well. Vehicles will become dirty when traveling off-road, and it'll be washed clean when they enter the water. Some changes are mentioned here at the end as well. Vehicles equipped with defensive smoke launchers will now automatically activate them if there's enough reaction time to do so. You can turn this on or off per vehicle. It's actually a nice change to hopefully help units survive a little bit longer, though it won't save your vehicles against fast-flying jets or ambushes where the missile might have taken the crew by surprise. SAM, or surface-to-air missiles, have actually been given a buff as well, allowing them to explode near an aircraft now through a new game mechanic. Before, a missile was either a hit or a miss. Now it has a chance to still do partial damage even on a miss, as long as it explodes near the aircraft. Finally, some anti-air missiles also got an upgrade. If they lose connection with the shooter, or the shooter has lost its target, they still activate their terminal guidance and can go pitbull. This will allow them to potentially still guide themselves to the intended target. I do wonder if this means it could hit friendly aircraft nearby the original target as well, something worth testing out. That was a lot of news and information to take a look at for Broken Arrow, and I still didn't cover every single thing. I am personally very excited to see some of these changes, especially to infantry, as well as of course those 2 new specs to play with and create decks with in the upcoming beta. What do you think? Which 2 specs will we see next, or would you like to see next? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.